You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Presented by Betano, it's time for the Thursday edition of Leafs Morning Take. It's Nick Alberga and Carter Hutton once again as we get set for the Leafs and Flyers on this Thursday night. What's going on, Huts?
Hey, not much, buddy. Ready to be back. Back-to-back starts for the kid. Let's go, baby. Big matchup tonight with the Flyers coming in, a hot team, and they're hungry, baby.
I love how you're fired up. We know in this era of analytics, it's tough seeing a goaltender start a back-to-back. Although I will say, Nico Dawes with New Jersey did that on Monday and Tuesday and won both starts. So maybe you win both of these.
Yeah, well, they need a goalie in Jersey, especially when Jack Hughes, your franchise player, is calling you out for making some saves that would help their team. So I went back-to-back a few times in my career. Sometimes I found it easier actually playing back-to-back because you're already in a rhythm. But honestly, with my body, it wasn't very sustainable, that's for sure.
You take that out of context, by the way, Jack Hughes. I know it was sort of made a bit of a story here in Canada, not really in the States because nothing ever is, but was that a direct shot at Vitek Vanacek?
I think just in general, right? I don't think
Yeah.
it's definitely like I don't think he's a bad enough person to just take a shot at him like that. I think it's just saying overall they need saves, they need to play better. I think it's an overall, I had that one time in when I was in Buffalo. Reinhardt had said something in an interview and it got kind of taken the wrong way. And I don't think it's a horrible thing to say, but at some point I think just as a team they need to be better. I don't think he's that big of a guy to call a guy out. And I think if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen behind closed doors if you really don't want to spread a cancer throughout a team.
I think you should have just fought him, but a lot happening in the NHL world. Jarmo Kekalainen loses his job. We got a Sam Reinhart revenge game coming up, and we got an appeal, a 5-game appeal for Morgan Rielly. Is this story ever going to end is my question.
I know. We just keep talking and talking about it. And, when I was in Buffalo, George Peros and the NHL player safety came in and talked to us. They had a meeting and they kind of went through the process of how they go through finding a suspension. Peros gets it. They get an email. They blast it out to everybody that works. They all analyze it. They all meet. They have a round table. They dissect it. They go over. They find comparables. And it goes on and on and on and on. It's quite a process. I get the appeal. You're trying to throw a shot in the dark. You're going to get something. But at this point, I feel like it's just falling on deaf ears. They've gone over it with fine tooth and comb. And I think what's done is done here.
So important to stress that the suspension did not exceed 5 games, which means there's only one step in the appeal process, and that's NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman as the adjudicator. The only reason I can have for this, number one, I mean, obviously money is of importance here in terms of the suspension, and it leads me to believe the Rielly camp thinks they can win this, even that they'd waste their time. But I think the people out there complaining about this, like, there's a reason why you're allowed to appeal suspensions and go through the process. I have no issue with it. I think it's important to note, too, Bettman has upheld all 3 appeals thus far this season. He did, however, reduce former Leaf Jason Spezza's 6-gamer to 4 games upon appeal, citing Spezza's long record of clean plays. So if Spezza's getting that treatment, I wonder what could happen for Rielly,
Yeah, it gives a possibility. It leaves the window open there. I guess my thing would just be not getting your hopes up. I understand why you go with the appeal, right? 5 games is a lot of time for Rielly to miss, and it's a lot of money, right? But in the same sense, it's hard for Bettman to kind of undermine what goes on with player safety. He put these people in place. He put them in power for a reason. So at that sense, I feel like it's always going to be tough. But having that history where Spezza got dropped a little bit because of his history, and Morgan Rielly's obviously been a clean player his whole career, so that bodes in his effect for me, Nicky.
I thought it was interesting, too, that after Tuesday's game, Sheldon Keefe had alluded to the fact that Brad Treliving was going to speak on Valentine's Day. Then he didn't. Maybe it's because of Rielly appealing the suspension, but none of the players spoke on it either, including Ryan Reeves. Like, are the Leafs trying to play like nice cop right now and be like, you know what? We're not going to say anything else. And maybe Commissioner Bettman's going to be like, you know what? These guys deserve something, and we're gonna tack off a couple games on the suspension. I just think the Leafs are just so interesting when they do stuff like this. Like, I don't even know why there was a reason to bring up that Treliving was going to speak yesterday. He didn't end up speaking, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones where I've been in different teams where stuff has happened and they've just come down and been like, you have your PR guy come in and be like, hey, if anybody asks you about this, just deflect the question, Because again, I think some things just get overthought through and through. Like, just keep it simple. But at the same time, I think enough was said about the topic, right? I think between me and you and everybody in this
Yeah.
world, so much was said. And then as the player standpoint, guys made their standpoint. They made their case. Reeves said what he said. Matthew said what he said. And just even Keefe, right? So it's at a point where it's like a dead dog. Let's move on. What's done is done. If the appeal works, it works. Let the powers up that be. We just got to play hockey now.
Yeah, I think he got his day, and now we'll see what happens over the next couple days. I just don't understand why the appeal process would take so long. Like, it's just a quick phone call. Hey, Commissioner Bettman, this is what I thought I did, blah, blah, blah. But it's always so drawn out. Like, it's so drawn out. This whole thing has been drawn out. It seems like it's been weeks since that happened with Ridley Grigg, but it was only last Saturday. So we'll see if maybe Rielly returns quicker than possible. Although, as mentioned, the record's pretty damn good. They're 15-2-1, dating back to last season in 18 outings without Morgan Rielly in the lineup. So maybe they're like, you know what, Morgan, take your time. We'll get you when we get you. Although obviously that's crazy talk because Morgan Rielly is their number one defenseman. We got Craig Button coming on from TSN in about 15 minutes to weigh in on the appeal process. And I also want to talk some prospects with him. Obviously, very, very tied into the scouting world. And the deadline's getting closer. And I'm just curious as to what the Leafs have to play with. Like, we know the big boys, but I'm curious to know, from Craig's standpoint, being a former GM, would he deal these guys for immediate help?
Yeah, I think that's where it gets interesting, right? It's that prospect pool when you start giving up picks or guys you have on the shelf, right? Because we always have that win mentality right now. We want to win, but at the same time, we want this team to be good for years to come, right? So it's always that tricky, you're trying to add to the back end. Like, do you add a goalie? Do you find some secondary scoring, in the depth six? But at the same time, you don't want to be giving away prospects that have your future, right? So it's interesting to see that side of it where sometimes it's so in depth, I think, for the normal fan who just watches at the NHL level to be like, hey, why are we doing this? Why don't we add this? It's like, well, there's a plan in place. They don't want to give up their future as well.
That's the riveting part for me. Like, are you going to burn a year conceivably of having the core four and the big boys just to work for the future? Or these guys really don't care about the future. They want to win right now. And that's the conversation we will have over the next couple weeks. And at this point, the Leafs haven't really given Brad Treliving, hope that something could turn around or a mentality that says, here, go for it. Like, they've been very, very inconsistent, a really good effort against St. Louis the other night. Maybe that continues against Philadelphia tonight at Scotiabank Arena. At the Leafs Nation 401, where you could subscribe on YouTube, search Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to hammer that like button. Leave us a review as well if you're finding us in podcast form. It really, really helps the brand and the podcast. Brought to you by DoorDash. It's time for the appetizer. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off, up to $10 in value, and zero delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. When you download the DoorDash app, enter code NATION25. That's code NATION25, all in uppercase. 25% off your first order with DoorDash. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms apply. So again, it's the Leafs and the Philadelphia Flyers. Of note here, after missing practice yesterday, John Tavares, Nylander, and Mitch Marner all accounted for at practice and trending towards playing in this game, which obviously is a positive, but the Leafs are coming off one of their better efforts of the season on Tuesday night, Huts.
I think a complete effort, right? And that's
Yeah.
something we want to see as fans, and I think Leafs want to see from a management coaching standpoint, especially with a depleted lineup, right? Going into that game, you're missing, some of your stars. We talked about $29 million in salary being missed, but I also take that as the fact of like, did St. Louis just have a night off too, right? St. Louis saw that these guys were missing. Did they let off the gas? And Toronto's like overextended because they know they were missing those players. But now, if these guys are missing or if they're back, is it sustainable? Tonight is a big game. Philadelphia is playing really well, and Philadelphia is one of those teams that wins by committee, something that the Leafs are trying to find, trying to stay away from just Matthews scoring every single night or just Nylander. So it'll be interesting to see this matchup because I think Flyers are going to go in there and try to make a statement game because they're playing well. And I think myself included, post All-Star break, I thought this was going to be the collapse of the Flyers. I thought they were going to start going down, all the stuff that went on with Carter Hart, Earson being the guy. He's been playing really well, so this is going to be a great game tonight. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, because you look at Philadelphia, I mean, you look at where they were a year ago at this time. They were like a laughing stock of the league, had a brutal, brutal year, and all of a sudden they go on a crazy epic run this year, and they're still in it around the trade deadline. But I mean, when you look around the league and teams are potentially throwing first-round picks in exchange for guys like Sean Walker and Nick Sealer and Scott Lawton of Oakville, Ontario, his name's been out there. You just wonder if Philadelphia stays the course and they go with the future and say, hey, this is not our year. That's my only wonder, but I think you make some really, really good points, and you're going to get their best effort. And I think that doesn't favor the Maple Leafs, unfortunately, when a team comes in like that. Although Got to give them credit. St. Louis is that type of team as well, and the Leafs sort of threw them around on Tuesday. So the flu's been ripping through this room, man. Like, do you recall any stories of your playing days? Because you sort of lose sight of that as a media member, somebody just watching on a daily basis. But like this stuff can rip a room, right? Like, I mean, I think it was a reality check when you see guys like Nylander get it and Marner get it and Tavares get it, that any day something catastrophic can happen where the flu bug rips through your team and you're up against it when it comes game time.
Yeah, it's tough. I've been in some situations where guys have been sick, you play through it, but it does seem to run through a team, especially during the COVID season there. I remember at one point our team kind of got it and everybody got hit with it. And they were actually, a lot of guys were really sick. I think Rasmus Ristolainen in Buffalo ended up in the hospital, and he's a super fit guy, takes really good care of himself. So it is scary, but I've been part of games where guys have flus and you're playing in important games and, they're on the IV bag before the game, in between periods, just trying to get through it. To hold a guy out of the lineup, I guess at this point is, a safety thing. But let me tell you, like, if there's a way that a guy can play and he's sick, he's going to find a way to play. Like, there's no reason if they are sick and they have the flu and they're missing minutes and they're missing time, it's because they are really under the weather. Because nobody wants to miss. They're competitive. I know we play 82 games and sometimes guys can check out during a game, but believe me, these guys want to play. And it's crazy how when it comes on, it's tough because you're around each other. You're playing a game. You're in the gym. You're in the shower. You're sweating, spit. Like it's kind of a cesspool if you really think about it. But when a guy gets sick, it's hard for not to creep in.
Yeah, it's the one thing you can't knock about Toronto's big boys. There are a lot of star players in this league. Like they don't miss time for like stupid stuff. And maybe it's not fair to call like sickness or flu stupid, but like very seldom do you see guys like Marner and Nylander and Tavares and Matthews miss games for that type of thing, Like, and that just told me that they were really, really sick. And I mean, we saw the video, like Mitch Marner showed up. He was trying to play that game. So you can never knock those guys for that. And I think it is important to humanize situations sometimes. Like imagine when you're sick and you feel like crap and all you want to do is lay in bed. These guys are being tasked with going to an arena, playing in a professional hockey game with zero energy. I could only wonder what that feels like. And people are like, "Oh, these are professional athletes." I get that, but I think it is important to humanize sometimes and say like these guys are battling through something. So I think hopefully this is the worst of it with this room because as you've mentioned, it tears through a room a bit, right?
Oh yeah, it does. And it has an effect, right? I feel like it wears on you. And if you don't get healthy and guys lose weight quickly, and now all of a sudden if you're playing at 200 pounds, now you've dropped down to
Yeah.
195, it makes a big difference in energy levels and the way you can play the game. Like for me, playing a full game, I used to sweat a ton, right? I would drop
Yeah.
6 to 8 pounds on a busy night, right? Because just the way I played and I had lots of jump. Where when I was younger, I used to play at a little bit like a lower weight. I was like 185. I was more lean, more like had deadly body. It looked better. And then as I got a little bigger and I went over 200 pounds, I was way more durable. I was injured less. So then if I had a bad run of like getting sick or I had played a ton of games and I wasn't getting as much food in me, it wore me down. My energy levels, my focus, everything had an effect. So times that by 10, when you get the flu, you get nailed with the flu to just jump back in there. It's tricky. So the last thing you want to do is let this snowball on these guys because it's a long season to begin with. And right now, this is the time of year where there's no breaks. Games just keep coming and keep coming. It's like Groundhog Day.
Could be a bit of a showcase game as well, Huts. We mentioned Sean Walker, Nick Sealer. You talk about Rasmus Ristolainen. He's been loosely linked to the Maple Leafs the last couple weeks. Maybe you could speak to that. I mean, you played with a guy in Buffalo. He's not playing tonight. He got banged up, so I believe he's going to miss about a month now. But would Ristolainen be a long-term fit for this Leafs team? I believe he still has a couple years left on that contract because I know the last couple years, in a hurry, it's gone south. Where early on in his career, he was with the Finnish junior team, right-handed shooting defenseman, running that power play, and very similar to talking about Jake McCabe in that light, where he was an offensive dynamo earlier on. It seems like Ristolainen's more looked at as like a shutdown guy now, which is like weird, but he hasn't really had a lot of success the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think he needs to be in a limited role. Like, granted, when we were in Buffalo together, we were the shits and we got pumped every night. And it was either me giving up bad goal or him making a bad play. And but it's one of those things where I think he was just playing in over his head, right? Like just like I was. I probably was never a 55 game goalie a year. I kind of had that sweet spot of playing 30. But for him, I think if you can have him in a little limited role, he is a mean guy to play against. He loves hurting guys. He loves being engaged, cross-checking, like making it hard to play against. So I think if you could have him in minimal minutes, he plays like a Jake McCabe, but just not as talented. So I think if you could have
Yeah.
him in a lower role, he's definitely a fit. I just think sometimes these guys come in with like, the pedigree of scoring and offense. And he's had some good offensive years or glimpses of it in his career. I just think you need to keep him in a box. And from there, he's a successful defenseman. But I wouldn't want to expect him to step into a big role.
Yeah, well, the chat's spoken. Michael writes in, Risto out for a month, won't be traded. So Mike's got some intel there, inside sources into the NHL. So Ristolainen is not going anywhere for the Philadelphia Flyers, but certainly a name they've been looking at the last couple of weeks. Just really, really curious to see what this team's going to do. Do you see this, by the way? The Leafs had 5 stalls for goalies in their dressing room on Wednesday. They had Samsonov, Joseph Woll, Martin Jones, Matt Murray, Dennis Hildeby. It's perfect I have you as my co-host today. How weird, awkward would that be to have so many goalies in a room like that?
No, it's like training camp. You're used to it. Everyone knows. It's like the elephant. It's the elephant in the room, right? Like you're all competing for the job. You understand it. Actually, Murr's a good guy. He just bought a house back here in Thunder Bay, and we were texting the
Oh.
other day, checking in. He sent me a video of him skating on the ice, getting ready to go. So you never know what could happen, right? Like, and it's this time of year where like you need depth and you need goalies because talk about the flu bug, talk about injuries, and talk about just we got goalies on the Leafs taking sabbaticals. So you can never have enough depth this time of year. And especially like you can flip a coin and hopefully somebody can get hot for the Leafs at the right time, Nikki.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? And I think Joseph Woll is getting closer. Like I think in the media scrum yesterday, they were talking about getting to that level where you start to anticipate a target date for a return. High ankle injury is a bit of a different animal, as you've mentioned time and time again on this podcast when it comes and pertains to goaltenders. But how many full practices do you think he needs? I mean, all this is subjective, of course, and every guy's different. But how many practices do you think he would need to get back to full bore here?
I think you need a few weeks, like of just
Yeah.
some timing. The timing is so important, right? You're going to do you're going to see a lot of shots, right? Your eyes are going to be sharp, your hands going to be sharp, but it's just that timing and like cardio that kind of comes with games. But I think a few weeks of practices and then get him in some games. Like even when he gets in a game, it's going to be a bit of a, you got to kind of find that grind again. It's a weird feeling, right? It's like between your ears, you just need to have that mental ability to jump back in and play well. But for me, seeing him get interviewed yesterday, his confidence level and just the way he handled the media is nice to see because he's a young guy and I feel like he's got some good games to fall back on now. So for me, it's exciting. And having an ankle injury in the past for me, I just, he's such a good, young, talented goalie. I hope there's no setbacks.
Wonder when that return could be for Joseph Woll, but he is the anointed one in this market, which is kind of scary to be quite honest about it. They need somebody to grab this team right now. The following interview is brought to you by our friends over at Battlegrounds Axe Throwing. Unlock the ultimate birthday party, team building event, or have a great date night with your significant other. To find a location and book an outing today, go to battlegrounds.com. That's BATL grounds.com as we welcome in the one and only from TSN. It is Craig Button. How's it going, Craig? Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Nick and Carter. Happy to be with you. I was just listening to the end of that conversation about Joseph Woll, and Carter, it's amazing to me that the difference between an ankle injury or a knee injury for a goaltender as opposed to a skater, because they're two very different things to come back from, and you're pushing off your legs, you're pushing off your knees, the stress you put on them, so. A goaltender needs a lot more time to get back into that form. And you can speak to it better than I can.
Yeah, it was one of those things. I feel like I was playing with the Blackhawks. I was in the minors in Rockford. Then all of a sudden, this RVH came into play. And I used to play VH, so it'd be vertical horizontal for a lack of a better word we couldn't come up with in the goalie community. But all of a sudden, we started using our ankles more for leverage. And I had to learn this. I was late into my 20s at this point, but these kids have been doing it for such a long time. Like even now at the hockey school we run here in Thunder Bay, these kids are so good at it. And for years, there's tons of leverage and power put on those ankles and knees. So an injury and a setback is tricky because for years you've had that. And even for me, late in my career, when I had my ankle injury, I had one ankle that had 30 years of playing goal on it. Then I had this one brand new ankle. So it was great for day to day, but not good for playing net.
So, Craig, I was going to ask you, is the league against the Toronto Maple Leafs?
No, just everybody in Toronto that roots for the Leafs thinks that the league is against them. It's almost become like a comedy. I mean, I wish this could be a Saturday Night Live satire, and we could have the cast of Saturday Night Live go on and carry on because, quite frankly, it's laughable. It's laughable that people could even think that the league is against the Toronto Maple Leafs, but. I guess when you're in the wearing the jersey and you're a fan, you want the best for your team, and you always think, oh, they're out to get me or they're out to get us or whatnot. I get it. I mean, that's just part of being a fan, but there's no truth to it, and I don't care what anybody says. I shouldn't say what anybody says. Nobody's going to convince me otherwise, is what I would rather say.
Craig, we had a chance to chat the other day a little bit on this Morgan Rielly topic, and now the appeal. Like, is there a leg to stand on here, or is this something that's just part of the process, right? You've been around hockey a long time. Is this just a shot in the dark here?
I don't know. I mean, first of all, I mean, you go back to Tommy Wilson, and the only reason I bring up Tommy Wilson is he was suspended. He had to serve the full number of games in the suspension, but when it got reduced, he got money back. So for Tommy Wilson, he had to sit out the full amount. He didn't get the number of games. Well, the number of games got reduced, would put more money back in his pocket. One of the things, and Carter, I think we were talking about this the other day. I don't think we were. The Department of Player Safety has been raising the bar. They did it earlier in the year. 4-game suspension to Charlie McAvoy. He appealed it. 4-game suspension to Rasmus Anderson. 6-game suspension to Perron. He appealed it. Now Morgan Rielly is appealing it. I think this is a real signal that the Department of Player Safety is setting a bar, and the players are like, oh my God, what's happening here? Because it's not just the games you're missing, you're also losing money. And so when the Department of Player Safety starts to raise that bar, it's not just the games you're missing, it's the money coming out of your pocket. So I think that this is now pushed back by the players and the Players Association to say, is this the right standard? And this is a great conversation, because we know that we want to make the game safer. We don't want the game to lose any of its physicality. But when the number of games goes up in suspensions, there's resistance, and there's resistance for any number of reasons. So I wouldn't call it a shot in the dark. I think there's a real methodology and a purpose behind it that leads you to appealing. But as we've seen, I mean, the one with Tommy Wilson went to the third-party arbitrator before it got reduced. The one with Charlie McAvoy, the one with David Perron, only went to the commissioner level. They never went and appealed it any further. So I think that this is just a case of pushing it to see if they can back off the Department of Player Safety. And I think that's where we run into the conundrum of, while we want the Department of Player Safety to make the game safe and mete out punishment, but not too much.
Yeah, and that's the thing you go back and forth with here. To be realistic, do you think Rielly has a case? Do you think he has a chance of obviously, if he's appealed here, but do you think he's got a chance of winning this thing?
Well, what case does he have? I would just like to hear the case. I mean, Much like Charlie McAvoy, did you mean to hit him in the head with your elbow? No. Did you hit him in the head with your elbow? Yeah. David Perron, did you mean to cross-check him in that type of manner? No. I mean, the players aren't trying to hurt other players. I would never suggest that, and I don't think they are. And we can go back to Marty McSorley wasn't trying to hurt Donald Brashear, but the fact of the matter is it's the act, right? So what's Morgan Rielly's defense? I wasn't intending to do it. Agreed. We believe you, Morgan. But you're getting suspended for a cross-check to the head in a non-hockey play. So what's your defense? What's your defense? I have no idea. I would love to be a fly on the wall. We should get that sponsored. We should get that sponsored by Nation Network. Get a camera in there on the hearing, and let's see how this hearing goes.
No, I like that, Craig. That'd be nice to be a fly on the wall in that one. But moving forward here to this Leafs team right now, and the trade deadline coming, what do you see this team? They obviously had a great effort the other night with a depleted lineup against St. Louis. Is this sustainable, or Tree Living going to make some moves here to try to move this team in the right direction come playoff time?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the direction. Mike Johnson and I were talking about this in the last few days, and you look at the Atlantic Division where they are. Right. And you look at Boston and you look at Florida, and I think you got to be realistic about your chances of how you match up against that team. And could they do enough at the trade deadline to get themselves in a spot where they could be competitive? And arguably, if you finish in third or you finish in second, you're going to have to go through two of those teams. And so I think that would be the first assessment. would they be better off in a wild card and moving over to the Metro? I'm not so sure that might not. Now, I know I'm trying to plan out different scenarios. I mean, as a team and as a coach and manager, you can't do that, which gets me to answering your question, which is I think they need help on the blue line. I think they need some reinforcements on the blue line, some strength. When they traded for Jake Muzzin a couple of years ago, I said, wow, is that ever a good move? Like big, strong, territorial. And I think defenders that can really add that element to your game. I mean, Morgan Rielly is clear cut their best defenseman. And then after that, it scales back, in my view, quite significantly. And how do you bolster that lineup in there? And I think if Brad Treliving could have an opportunity to not only try to improve the team now, but try to do it with an idea that what I do now, maybe I can, kill two birds with one stone. Try to acquire a player, and if it's Hanifin or Tanev, and know I can sign them, I also have them for next year and the years beyond when I know I have this group that I believe in. And we know there's every reason to believe in the core five. Let's call it the core five. There's every reason to believe in them, but building out around them, I think, is the challenge for Brad Treliving. There's opportunities, certainly, acquiring pending free agents, but if he could get those guys signed, and Brad has an advantage. He knows Tanev. He signed him as a free agent in Calgary as the manager. He traded for Hanifin. So he really knows these players, and they know him. And so if there was ever an advantage to try to build out your team going forward, and going forward means this year and in the future years, I think Brad has an opportunity that a lot of GMs don't have.
So we're a day after Valentine's Day. Let's play matchmaker. So you mentioned Calgary. Is there a name out there on the blue line that you think that just makes too much sense that could really, really help this Maple Leafs team out right now, and I guess longer term too?
Well, I think it's Noah Hanifin. I know how good Chris Tanev is. We all know how good Chris is, and he's a little bit older. He would absolutely help now. I mean, I don't know what type of term he'd be looking at his age, but I think he's got lots of good hockey left in him. But Noah Hanifin this year is a 27-year-old defenseman. Excellent, big minutes, skate, can take on the heavy lifting, and certainly you're looking for those types of players at that age. If you're going to give them a long-term contract, there's not going to be a fall off, in my view, in Noah Hanifin's game. And to me, he fits the way the Toronto Maple Leafs want to play. They play up tempo. They want their defense. You watch Rielly. They want everybody pushing up with that forward group. And I think Noah, I can't see, there's lots of defensemen around the league, but available defensemen to me are the ones that, like him, that I think would significantly improve the blue line and fit in exactly with how they want to play.
Yeah, I think Hanifin's severely underrated. I've been saying for weeks, if they could do it, I get both those guys. That's where I include sort of a first-round pick. But curious to get your intel. Obviously, you're really tied into the scouting department. What's your read on the Maple Leafs capital in terms of prospects right now? Because it doesn't sound like it's overly busy in terms of the cupboard, right?
Thin. There's nothing. But when you're trading first-round draft picks, you're picking after the first round for the most part. Everything has been kind of thrown into the pot of trying to help this group play. I mean, the Pittsburgh Penguins find themselves in exactly the same position. And when you're trying to push it ahead, I mean, the Tampa Bay Lightning, same thing. You're trying to push it ahead. There's a price to trying to push it ahead, and I would not suggest that there's any other way to do it right now. In a very, very last 4 years, what I call the COVID CBA. It really, with the cap not going up, it really restricted teams from being able to do some things. It took away some of the flexibility, but. Easton Cowan is their best prospect. It's not even close. And Fraser Minton has a chance to be, in my view, a good, solid, industrious third line center. We talk about Dennis Hildeby. How many teams need a goaltender? Most teams in the league have goaltending prospects in their system. After that, I mean, I think they have some guys that they're hoping can advance their game. Topi Niemelä comes to mind. But other than that, it's a very, very thin prospect pool, but not one that you would be surprised to hear that assessment of.
Yeah, Craig, obviously having, trying to push it forward and giving away prospects, you have to develop from within, right? And a saying I've been using for my first real trade deadline, like, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, right? Like, because you see that lots, right? You make a trade where it's a guy's a prospect, he turns out to be a guy like 5 years later, you're like, oh, I should have kept him. These players like Easton Cowan, Fraser Minton, are they someone that can help the Leafs right now? Or are they still a ways away? Like, where do you feel they're at in the prospect? Like, are they ready to come into the NHL?
Yeah, I'm going to use an example, Carter. A number of years back, uh, Nick Robertson was a player that, he can help us now. They were looking, I mean, entry level contract, everything. I mean, we're 3-4 years past where that moment came for Nick Robertson, and it's great to have high hopes, and it's great to believe in the potential of a player, but it takes time. It takes time. So my answer on Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton is no, they can't come in and help them now. I don't think they can come in and help them next year. And I'm not so sure about the year after. And I use Nick Robertson as an example. And so that's where the real challenge comes for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You have this core five. Matthew Nyes falls into it. Nick Robertson is finding his way. He is coming into his own and finding his way. So you start to go, okay, what do we need to help this team and this group? And are these guys there? And when is that time? You'd love to be able to say, yeah, next year. Like last year at this time, I think you could absolutely say Matthew Nyes could come in and help. I don't see that with Fraser or Easton, and with respect to coming in up. So that's now. Do you want to say, okay, it's 2 years, and we're still right in our window. We don't want to find ourselves short there. That's a real conundrum for Brad Treliving and his management group.
It is very Toronto in terms of prospects and how people build them up before they even played a game in this league. So about a month ago, just to wrap, you mentioned that you didn't view the Maple Leafs as a Stanley Cup or a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. Is there anything they can do over the next little while, whether it's making a deal or it's in their play, that could change your mind on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I look at who the competition is, and I just touched on the Atlantic Division. I mean, I just don't see them as in the same class as Boston or Florida, and I think they'd have a real challenge against Carolina. So let's notch them at 4. Well, that's not a top level Stanley Cup contender in my view. And I think they're thin in critical areas. You think about 2 months going down hard hockey, and it's hard hockey, and it's not about can they play hard, it's can you sustain it for 24, 25 games. Do they have the players that can sustain it? I don't think they do. And I think that for them to move forward, I know there's a lot of different discussions. Oh, add a forward, there's only so many, but scoring isn't their problem. Like, those guys score. I really believe that if they bolstered that blue line, and I keep using the term kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If they could do it from now and it builds into the future, we talk about Hanifin, we talk about Tanev, I think that would improve their chances in a real meaningful way. I don't think going and trading for a depth defenseman, when I say depth, I'm talking about a bottom pair defenseman, is going to improve their lots. I think they have to do something serious and significant if they want to improve their lots. And I'm not even so sure that puts them in the category with the 3 teams I just mentioned. It would improve their chances, but I don't think it puts them in that lot yet.
Yeah, I think we can all agree they're multiple pieces away from being a
Mhm.
legit contender. If even dating back to the last couple of years. So we'll see what's in store leading up to March 8th. Craig, can't thank you enough for taking some time today. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure.
Take
No
care.
problem. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks. Yep.
That is the one and only Craig Button from TSN. Does a great job. Love his opinions, hot takes. Just tells it how it is sometimes. You need that. You need that in life, man. I love it.
No, and I love it. Honestly, he had a tough go with me one time. He tore me apart after Ovi scored 2 on me, but like I respect him. Like, honestly, it's great though. I've talked to him. I talked to him the other day on another show, and he's just passionate and he has his takes, but it's like well thought out, right? Like, he has good takes, and he's going to defend his side and he's going to have data. And I honestly appreciate it. Sometimes you have to go against the grain, and but he's always got a lot of insight and stuff. So it's nice to see obviously him being involved and helping us out come on the show as well.
Definitely. Didn't say anything out of the ordinary. I think we can all agree. Like, they're multiple pieces away. I'm holding hope that this team can just figure it out. again, you watch efforts like the way they played against St. Louis the other night, and you're like, what if? Like, why can't they use this Rielly suspension as a galvanizing moment like last year when Florida's like, you know what? Keith Tkachuk called us soft. And I think we forget it was 2-0 in that game in Toronto at Scotiabank Arena. Florida came back from the dead, wins it in OT, goes on a crazy run, makes the playoffs by 1 point, gets all the way to the Stanley Cup final before they're dissected by the Vegas Golden Knights. You start to wonder, why can't that be the Maple Leafs? But unfortunately, from this perspective, at least for me, I look at this roster, it's very incomplete. Whereas you look at that Florida roster from last year, there's some guys who are going to drag you through the fight. And maybe that's my hope too with guys like Bertuzzi and Domi, right? Like Bertuzzi's been fighting it, Domi's been fighting it all season long. Perhaps the Leafs have sacrificed a bit in the regular season to be harder to play against in the playoffs. Having said that, these guys haven't really shown they're hard to play against in the regular season or the playoffs for that matter right now.
Yeah, you just hope it can get to the point where maybe they can turn it on or find it, or the fact that they're built better for the playoffs, right? Like even the player, you talk about Corey Perry, right? Like he's not going to do much for you during the regular season, but all of a sudden when the playoffs start, he's the guy that just drags you into the fight. He can, do what he needs to do to aggravate the other team and find a way. So you think about Domi, you think about Bertuzzi, they're playing a tough game, right? They're going to go to the hard areas, create some space for the other players. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get it, but my problem with it is like, is it like a little too late in that sense of like, when are they going to start to turn it on? Like at some point, it's like, I feel like we just keep waiting for something to turn and change and find their game, and it just hasn't happened. So that's my issue with it. It's
Yeah.
hard to just get to the playoffs and turn it on. Where you talk about Florida, they were already playing playoff hockey. St. Louis, the year they won the cup, they were already playing playoff hockey, especially when you're not a star-studded team, right? You got to find a way to peak at the right times. And I'm hoping that happens here in the second half, but for those, especially that bottom six players.
I think the Leafs equivalent would be Ty Domi doing an interview, which he never does, on hopefully Leafs Morning Take. And he's like, fuck these guys. They're so soft, blah, blah, blah. And then the Leafs are like, you know what? Ty Domi just called this. It's not going to happen. That's so unfortunate. Maybe it was just a circumstantial thing last year with Keith Tkachuk, but it just pretty incredible how the path just parted for that team after Kachuk's comments, right? But I think that's a bit of the hope here with Leafs Nation is that they still have some racetrack remaining in this season, right? There's what, 31 games remaining that they could sort of figure this out. But I'm curious to see what they have tonight. Wendy's is letting you win real food with your fantasy teams this year in Daily Faceoff. For those of you who smoke the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes, They'll have you winning despite your lack of team building skills. Download the Wendy's app, score yourself 150 bonus reward points on your first order, and grab a sweet victory for the mouth-watering jaws of defeat, along with some fresh, never frozen beef. Sign up to play Daily Face-Off to win weekly prizes like the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. So it's the Leafs and Flyers, and maybe a bit of a scheduling quirk, but the first of 3 versus Philly in the final 31 games of the season. I do not like opponents like this for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, these are scary opponents, right? I've
Yeah.
played on teams like this where there's no expectations. You've already played, the pressure's kind of off. If they were to crash right now and just start playing horrible, nobody would care. But Torts has these guys, a pretty green team, playing in a lot of meaningful games, finding their ways. And I found sometimes, you talk about St. Louis the other night playing against the Leafs that's like, depleted and they play really good. Sometimes when you're playing against those teams that don't have as much to play for, or the pressure is off, the magnitude, they're dangerous. So I think this is going to be a really big game tonight for both sides, right? You could see Flyers getting to play in a really meaningful game. At the same time, can the Leafs answer the bell after one of their best performances in, pretty much all season, where they played the right way? So this is a good one. I'm looking forward to this one tonight a lot, Nikki.
It's sneaky in terms of the standings. Like Philadelphia is 2 points up at Toronto. The Leafs do have 3 games in hand, but you're playing with house money if you're Philadelphia. Like there's just simply no pressure on that team. Like now Carter Hart's done for the year. Like they've got their number 2 goalie. There's no pressure. You weren't supposed to be in a playoff conversation. And teams like that are scary. And we've seen this happen to the Leafs before, but in general around the league, like teams like this are scary. And I couldn't agree with you more, where it's like everything happened a couple weeks ago and Philly started losing some games even before that. And you start to wonder if, like, is this where they're going to drop off? And then they don't, right? They've been really, really good since the All-Star break. So the Leafs better be ready. It reminds me a lot of last year. It was that Konechny game where Giordano got involved and Konechny took liberties with Toronto's big boys. Like, we all know what the game plan will be for Philadelphia tonight, especially with that head coach, John Tortorella. Like, they're going to try to run the Leafs out the building. And especially now, knowing three of their big boys are sick and they're missing their number one defenseman in Morgan Rielly, you rest assured, like, that's how Philadelphia is going to try to play this game. They always play that way anyways, but especially against a team like the Maple Leafs, that's what they're going to set out to do.
Yeah, I think, and you're not going to catch them off guard, right? Like where I feel like that St. Louis game, it's like, hey, man, Marner's out, Tavares is out. Maybe it's like we let off the gas a bit. Like they're going to be prepared for whatever lineup they get tonight, depleted, if they're healthy or not, and they're going to try to let the Leafs self implode. So for me, it's
Yeah.
interesting, and looking at the standings, talking about Philly and where they're at, I just think that like you don't want to be that wild card 2 spot. Like if you can stay out of the Atlantic and get the Rangers matchup better than trying to go through Boston and Florida for me. And I think this team is going to come out flying tonight. And Vicky just mentioned Couturier being named the first captain. I think there's a lot to play for tonight. It's his first game as a captain. They're coming into Toronto. There's always a lot of local talent, and it's going to be a great matchup. And we'll see what happens here if this Leafs team can have a more consistent effort again.
Yeah, maybe Couturier takes a dumb penalty because he's so horned up, but unlikely because he's such a veteran and has been in the league for X amount of years and is actually a really, really cool story in terms of coming back when you thought his career was finished, now named captain of the Philadelphia Flyers. So maybe that plays a bit of an impact. By the way, I know some people in the chat are asking, as mentioned earlier on, maybe you missed it, but Mitch Marner, John Tavares, and Willie Nylander were at practice at the morning skate, I should say, and are expected to go. But again, we'll find out closer to game time when it comes to the Leafs. We know Ilya Samsonov will start since returning 5-2-0, 1.99, 919, one shutout. How do you feel about Samsonov right now? I think he's been up and down the last couple starts. Joseph Woll around the corner, and Martin Jones still banged up.
I thought we were around the corner, but I still think he needs a little bit of time, like just to find a way to compete a little better. Like I feel like even the game against St. Louis, like he didn't get a lot of action, just a little bit sloppy on some plays where he is a goalie when he finds his rhythm and finds his flow early. So tonight will be one of those games because Philly doesn't generate a crazy amount of offense. Like, if you look into advanced analytics, they're kind of middle of the pack for most things. They're just like a good hockey team all around. So it'll be one of those games like when they get their chances, it's going to come, but it's not going to come in waves. Sometimes when you're getting 30, 40 shots and the chances are coming, it's easier to get into that rhythm. So tonight will be a good test for them coming off that game, knowing where they are, like seeing if he can, play well again here. And I think with Woll coming, it's going to be that test because I think over time, Samsonov has done better when no one's pushing him. But Woll's going to come back, start to push him. Let's see how he responds now with somebody nipping at his heels.
First goal is massive in this game. I mean, it's cliche to say that, but especially coming off the other night against St. Louis and the confidence you have, and Philadelphia is going to try to run you out the building and be physical. To score that first goal, I think would be massive for this Leafs team. The Betano wrap-up is presented by Betano.ca. The game starts now, 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Major announcement. Betano is the official partner of Copa America 2024, taking the beautiful game to new heights in the Americas. Join Betano on their journey of passion, unity, and unforgettable football moments. Any bets specifically you're looking at in this game, I should say?
In this game, honestly, I like Konechny getting a goal. He's just buzzing, and I feel like the way he shoots the puck, he's always a threat. I don't know how the Leafs are going to do tonight. I think I would touch the over here tonight. I just think with this younger goalie, Ersson, coming into Toronto, it's a lot on his plate, and Samsonov still hasn't sold me everything yet, so we'll see what happens.
I know Rosie hates when I do this, but I always look back at the last couple meetings, and he doesn't think it transfers game to game. But data's data. It didn't work in our favor the other night when I mentioned taking the over between St. Louis and Toronto. Having said that, half the Leafs roster was out, including $29 million or whatever it was. So I think we were doomed from the beginning. But I think it is important to bring up in terms of a betting standpoint, if you want to tail this or not. The over is hit between the Leafs and Flyers in 5 straight meetings and 6 of 7. That's why I think if there's a play that you want to trend towards, it is that. Having said that, I'm sort of lukewarm on it, just more so because of the way the Leafs played the other night, because of sort of the way they've been rallying and the Rielly injury. Like they might be buying in a bit more defensively. But I think I just got that feel there's going to be offense,
Yeah, especially after the last game, right? You think it might open up a bit, but I guess part of me really hopes that they can come out with the same effort and just grind it out and like let's bore some of those fans that are sitting down there eating their sushi and getting their Chardonnays down in the VIP bowl, right? Because that's the hockey that's going to win when it matters, right? And that's something for me. You want to see a little more consistent effort, and like maybe this is what it takes for Keefe to get through to these guys to play on the right side of the puck.
I would just love to see a loud building, a Thursday night in Toronto, big game, big implications in terms of the standings, torches in town. Like, I'd love to see that place just rocking, but very curious to see how this Leafs team looks. And again, it's sort of a comedy act at this point on this podcast, game to game. You just have no clue which Leafs team is going to show up, you know?
Yeah, I know it is the same thing, right? We get the leafy efforts and this leafy team that we have here, but at least we have something to go on. Like, let's see,
Yeah.
even for Bobby McMahon, let's see what he can go. Keep going. Let's see this bottom six get going. I love like McCabe grinding it out there, getting interviewed. His face looks like he's been through war. Something to get this rallying around the fact that like we got to play hockey. It's a tough game and let's grind it out. And this is a team that's going to challenge you tonight because they come at you with 4 lines.
Mr. D writes in, should be a map of Thunder Bay behind you. I guess people in the chat are talking about the map of the world you got behind you. What's the significance of that?
Well, the significance of the map is I'm in my son's room because we just bought a new house and I am up in my son's room. And this is something that I think my wife bought it from some store when we lived in Buffalo and it's been dragged around and I put it up here. And next thing you know, now this is my office. I'd show you his bed and he's got a shark pillow, but this is life for me right now. The glory of you. I used to sit on the bench and watch games. Now I sit up here and watch it.
No, it's fair enough. I think it looks great. Looks fantastic. Were you in Buffalo, by the way, when UPL was there?
I was my last year. He was kind of making his way and
Did you know though,
had a
like,
chance to get them.
did you know, like, he's really coming into his own right now?
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me, man. That's
Yeah.
why I hate hockey people and like the pressure. It's like we live in this era now where it's like now, now, now. We want Amazon. I want it on my doorstep. I just ordered food. Give it to me now. Where it's like they're kids, man. It's goaltending. It's hard. It takes time. There's like a development. So even the fact that they rushed him, then they rushed Levi, it takes time, like, especially as a goalie, right? It's a lot harder. It's a lot more between your ears. Like, think I never really cut my teeth, made the NHL full time till I was like 26. And I still had like a 10-year career and some successful seasons where like most times you'd be like 26 years old, you haven't made it yet. Like, what a loser. Where like it takes time, man. This is so I'm a big believer in him, just his size alone. He needs a little bit of grooming. I feel sometimes when he's playing bad, he chases the game, or just back himself up and let the game come to him. He has a lot of chance to be good here.
A lot of examples of goaltenders just takes a while. Takes a while to get your footing under you, and UPL has been great for the Buffalo Sabres, although again, they're going to miss the Stanley Cup playoffs. Leaf Nation 67 writes in, should the Leafs spread out the lines with all the big boys back, Domi with Mitch or Willie on the third line? It's a good question because, again, it's one game, but going back the other night, I thought the Bertuzzi, Domi, Robertson trio had a pretty good look to it. And, if the big boys do come back and play in Marner and JT and Nylander as well, I wonder what the configuration could look like. Because, again, I think if we're at the time in the year, and Sheldon Keefe has tried every possibility at this point, if it looks like it works and they played the way they didn't score a goal the other night, I think you almost have to come back with it, no?
No, I think so too, right? And I saw a quote the other day actually from Matthew Shane with Frank Saravelli.
Yeah.
A little less for a lot more. And it's something that kind of stuck with me, right? Because it gets to the point in the NHL when you play with these guys that are, I think for me, I had a different mindset because I always had to fight for everything I got. I was never like a silver spooner. Like if I wasn't playing, I was like, oh, okay, I figure it out. Where some of these guys are so used to getting their cookies, so used to getting all the minutes, so used to getting whatever. So if you can get them to buy in for the good of the team, it's going to work for the best, right? Even Connor McDavid, obviously he went off the other night for 6 assists, but during that run, he had taken a back seat in a sense, playing more minutes. I talk about the time when Trotz came into Washington, got Ovi and got all those guys to play more of a complete game and to sacrifice a little bit of your own stats for the good of the team. And this is where I think this Toronto team's at. Like they're not that far off, but can you get these guys to get to expand their role or take less of a role for what's good for the team?
Huts, I get it. I've been covering this team for like 8 years, 9 years, whatever the hell it is. I've had this conversation 18 billion times. They are at a crossroads. I just don't know if they can put it all together. I hope they can. It would be kind of amazing to watch this team go on a significant run. I thought it was happening last spring, and then we saw what happened against the Florida Panthers. But we'll leave it at that for today. Looking forward to the Leafs and Flyers. I know some of you have asked about Jay Rosehill. He's okay, albeit he did call me at 8 a.m. today to talk about his flight being delayed. He's off to Cancun with the family. He will be doing the show from there. but he won't be back tomorrow. So Anthony Stewart's filling in tomorrow. Rosie tentatively back and scheduled for Monday from Cancun, probably with 3,000 beers in his hand. So that's coming up. But Huts, it's been great the last couple of days to get your perspective. Obviously, deadline season, humanizing the situation, and goaltending. I'll be watching the crease quite a bit over the next little while here.
Yeah, it's obviously that time of year where goaltending is, the most important factor, right? It's like its own little game inside a game, right? But obviously it was great being on back-to-back days, getting my flow. I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully the chat wasn't buzzing me up too much for being in my kids' room shooting here.
No, they called you Carmen Sandiego. I think nobody would get that reference anymore. I used it a couple weeks ago, and the person was like, What are you talking about?" But yeah, it's a pretty reasonable reference for my age demographic. But great stuff. Again, looking forward to this Leafs Flyers game. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Great stuff as per usual. At the Leafs Nation 401, do us a favor, hammer that subscribe button, hammer that like button. Leafs Want to Take wherever you find your podcast as well. Leave us a review, 5-star. That would be fantastic, and it'll set us to new limits here on the podcast. And, of course, to our guest in Craig Button of TSN, thank you so much for stopping by again. That's Carter Hutton. I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk on Friday. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosa. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.